Hey guys, Eric with Vanguard here. Tonight we're going to do a couple small steps to go over the Vanguard Demon. We're going to go through a couple of the drivetrain steps on daily maintenance, diagnostic issues, and kind of verify which each O-ring actually does within inside the drivetrain. Then we're going to do another one on the HPR to kind of figure out how the HPR works, how to diagnose any issues like leaking in the grip frames, leaking down the barrels, simple everyday steps that just go back to simple fixes, which are O-rings or lubrications and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and take out the drivetrain here. Now when pulling out this drivetrain, you should only have to turn this back now about 3/4 to a full turn to pull the entire drivetrain out one piece. So once you have the core out, let's go ahead and set this to the side. Let's go ahead and inspect this core right now first. The outer O-rings here are what's going to seal the outer edge of the can, of course. You want to inspect. There's 5 O-rings here, 1 on the back cap, 3 in the center, 1 on the front of the can. These O-rings need to be completely lubricated to seal with inside the marker. You want to inspect them for nicks or scratches or dings or any type of wear. After you've done that, go ahead and tear the drivetrain apart by holding the can, holding the back cap. You should be able to spin it off fairly easy. Once you spin it off, you're going to have what we call is the bolt guide. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and push the bolt forward, pull off the bolt tip O-ring, just like that, squeezing it together, pulling off the bolt tip O-ring. Next, we're going to go ahead and push out the drivetrain, the bolt. So right now you should have 3 separate pieces. You should have the guide, the bolt, and the can. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with the guide. We're going to set these to the side. The guide, let's go ahead and wipe it on down. Make sure there's no lube in there. Make sure it's all clean, no debris, no old dirt. Then what we're going to do is we're actually going to inspect these O-rings here. You have 3 O-rings that you have a bumper, an inner bolt seal, and then a bolt tip seal. You want to inspect these for any type of wear or damage or any type of looseness within the guide. Also, what you can do is if you hold it here, you can actually spin the back cap off and disassemble it completely, coming off like this, and you have an O-ring right back here that seats into the back cap, which is if you're having a leak come out the back cap or around the guide, this would be the O-ring right here. So after that, like I said, you want to make sure everything's always clean, checked, make sure all the O-rings are actually not nicked or scratched or pinched. So that's that part right there. So let's go ahead and put this back together and lubricate this correctly. So your bolt guide here, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and take our lube of choice, whether it be Monkey Poo, Dow 55. I recommend Dow 55 because we want the O-rings to swell a little bit, seal up and soften within the bolt or the can. You get a little bit better glide that way. Dow 55 seems to last a little bit longer within the system, so you're not having to maintain it as much. But I still maintain it before every day of play. So what we're going to do with this system, we have a dynamic O-ring system, meaning we have no moving O-rings within this system that actually seal besides the bolt tip. So what we're going to do is we have this center guide O-ring, which is one of your drive forces of the bolt system. This O-ring right here will seal internally to help drive the bolt forward. Then you have your tip O-ring here, which is helping drive the bolt backwards. So if either of these leak, if the guide O-ring here, which is an 806, if this thing starts to leak, what will happen is you'll get a leak in the grip frame, almost like a solenoid leak or overpressured within the regulator, but I would check that. So let's go ahead and look at the tip O-ring. Tip O-ring, if this tip O-ring is to leak, you'll have a leak down the barrel, Easy way to kind of diagnose that, or if you're not having, your bolt is cycling real slow backwards to where you're kind of getting hung up in the breech and you're chopping a little bit of paint. That's the biggest portion right there. If you're chopping paint, you want to change this tip O-ring, which is a 011 O-ring. Good thumb of to look at is on your guide and your bolt here. The way to tell if these are actually worn out, you want to take your guide, slide it into your bolt, and before this O-ring seals to the front tip of the bolt, you want to see if it actually has tension dropping itself right inside. So right now that O-ring won't drop itself in. I physically have to push it in. You'll feel it kind of pop in. But if you're not getting any type of tension there, you want to go ahead and replace that O-ring, because that definitely needs to seal to help drive the force of the bolt forward. Another thing is, once you actually get that in there, your next portion, what you're going to have here is the bolt tip. So it's going to be kind of loose like this inside until you hit that portion. Once you hit that portion, you should be able to feel it seal. Make sure that O-ring is sealing. Another way to tell if that bolt tip O-ring is sealing, put your finger over the bolt face and pull. It should spring back, just like this. That's telling me that it's sealed. I can actually feel it pulling against and drawing air against my finger. And I know I have a tight seal with my finger this way, so it's actually drawing itself back. So that's telling me my bolt tip is in good shape. You also want to inspect to make sure you don't have any scratches within the bore on the bolt tip, or scratches within the bore on the guide O-ring. Alright, so let's go ahead and lubricate this bolt, or this guide. What I normally do is I run about that much lube on my finger. I swipe it just along here to where I put a coat over the top of the guide O-ring, and same goes for the tip. So I have a coat over the tip and a bolt over, or a thin coat over the guide O-ring, the center guide O-ring. You can wipe off any excess lube on the tip or down the shaft here. Make sure you didn't get any of that on there. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and slide the bolt in. Once it's in, kind of work it back and forth a little bit, making sure that when you're doing that, the bolt and the bumper here are actually working, that you're not pushing the bumper or it's too soft and it's actually slapping the back here, so you're getting that ting with inside your marker. When you're cycling the gun, you'll hear ting ting ting, and you think it's kind of coming from the tank, but it's actually because of this back O-ring right here. It's starting to get wore or soft or something like that, and you'll actually hear a ting within the marker. Okay, next what we're going to do is actually our bolt system here. As you can see, our bolts are anodized. They're hard anodized. They're not polished, but they are hard anodized, which makes them a little bit slicker, a little bit harder to scratch because of the anodization. One thing you do notice, like I said, we don't have any O-rings on this drivetrain bolt because we run a dynamic system, which is a blow-forward system, unlike a Lux, which is a balanced valve. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to lubricate this bolt. Let's go ahead and make sure we're clean. Let's wipe it down, and we're going to get about the same amount of lube. So what we're going to do is we're going to run and make sure we have a coat, which is on the sail portion of the bolt. So once we have a coat here, you want to be able to see the lubricant on there, not a thin, barely any coat, just wet. You actually have to have a coat of grease on this portion of the sail. Same thing goes for the remaining portion of the bolt, because what's going to happen is once you push it through, it's going to want to wipe all that lube off there and kind of build up on the back O-ring. But by making sure that you have enough coated on the drivetrain system, you'll make sure you ensure that you're lubricating the entire inner portions of the can. So let's go ahead and lube this up here. Now you can actually see that I have a thin coat of lube throughout the entire through the entire bolt, you can actually see that we have lubricant on there. It's not a thin layer. You can actually see the color of the lubricant, which means we're properly lubed for this system. Next, we're going to go to the can. We're going to look at the internal portions of the can. We want to go ahead and get it all wiped down. If you can't get your finger in there or a rag in there, what I generally do is I'll take the rag, one of my Allen keys, making sure not to scratch the side, but I'm pushing that rag inside there so I can get all the way up to the tip, or at least the inner portion of the can, to wipe it down and get all the debris or dirt or anything like that. A lot of people, they go ahead and they pull the O-rings. You can go ahead and do that. Take the O-rings out, clean them, wipe them back down, or leave them in there and kind of wipe them off. As long as you're not breaking paint or you got a lot of dirt from your hoppers or your pods and stuff like that dropping down inside there, wiping it out should be sufficient enough. Right, after you got the internal portions of the can all wiped down, we're going to go ahead and inspect our internal drive O-rings. What we have here is we have on the inside rear portion of the can, we have what it's about halfway through the middle of the can, which is the bolt sail O-ring. What this helps with is actually the driving force going forward in the bolt system. Helps seal it so there's a clean chamber of air within this portion here to help drive the bolt forward. If you're starting to have first shot drop off, or you're getting not complete full cycles, you want to go ahead and change that rear 019 O-ring. Next we have here, and that is a black Buna 70, and it's a 019 is the size. Next we're going to have on the inside portion of this can, you're going to have two more right on the inside of these grooves here. You're going to have one polyurethane, which is going to be the first one, and then the second one inside is going to be a 70 black 017 O-ring. These two O-rings here serve a great purpose within the system here. The rear portion, the rear O-ring here, which is the black Buna O-ring, is your bolt drive O-ring. This is your main force O-ring for this this power core. This O-ring will show signs of wear because this is your main sealing O-ring on the bolt to help drive the bolt forward with force for exhausting or anything like that. This O-ring will start to wear. We're seeing anywhere right now from about 20 cases to around 35 cases. We're starting to see a little wear and break-in, which is actually good. If you're not getting any issues with bolt stick or first shot drop-offs and stuff like that, you're getting a good wear on this bolt, meaning you haven't under lubricated your bolt and you're not drying it out, creating too much heat and friction. Next O-ring is going to be the first O-ring within inside the can is what we call a fill shutoff. This O-ring shuts off the fill within inside the system after the cycle. Once that has cycled forward, it completely shuts the fill of air off into the front of the chamber so the bolt can cycle backwards and you're exhausting all the air out the front of the bolt. After the bolt has released its pressure out the front, exhausting out the front or exhausting out the solenoid, it'll actually shut itself off and recharge to force the bolt back. Next O-ring here on the very tip is your guide. Basically it's your bolt guide. It helps guide the bolt forward. It also seals off the fire chamber within inside the gun itself, because all this is filled for air volume that we use to cycle the bolt, hold the pressure, allow us to lower the internal pressure of the gun. So if you're actually getting a little bit of leaking around the bolt down the barrel, which is around the bolt, because remember before, if we stuck our finger over the face of the bolt and it shut the leak off, it was the bolt tip O-ring. But if we went ahead and had a leak down the barrel and we put our finger over the tip of the bolt and it was still leaking, most likely it's going to be this O-ring on the tip of the can, which you can kind of tell if you wiggle your bolt around a little bit inside, kind of just force it, you'll hear it hiss a little bit louder, or actually seal up. So you want to go ahead and change that O-ring. Same thing kind of goes with the outer edge of the can. If you're getting leaks down the barrel with this front one, you'll be able to tell by kind of pushing the bolt around why it's sealed up. It'll either get louder, you can tell by those two. Another one that on the outer edge of this can, the center O-ring here, if you're starting to get bolt stick, as well as the inner 17 Buna O-ring, which is black one, this middle O-ring here also could be leaking to where it's leaking past internally behind that O-ring and creating bolt stick. So it's creating a pocket of air within inside here, not letting the bolt cycle completely forward, so it's not shutting it off. You want to go ahead and change that O-ring. Other than that, let's go ahead and lubricate the inner portions of the can. So let's just take a little bit of lube on my finger, and you're going to lube the sail O-ring, the 019 sail O-ring. Stick your finger in there, get to the O-ring, and just kind of wipe it around the sail itself. Next, you have your forward shutoff O-ring, and then you have your bolt drive O-ring. What I generally do on these is I'll take my Allen key and I'll dip it in my lube just a little bit, and then I'll actually use that to coat my O-rings. That'll coat enough of the two O-rings there. Once you get that, kind of wipe it off so you don't have too much excess lube on there, and just run it around. So you're not having so much build up, because once you push the bolt through, you're gonna pop all the lube out of these holes right here, these fill holes. Same kind of goes for this front one right here. I just use the tip of my Allen with a little bit. I just kind of work it around a little bit, a couple different spots, and then kind of just help do it like that. So once you have that all lubricated, inspected, all your O-rings are either fresh or you're just re-lubing the bolt for the day, what you can do is you go ahead and slide the drivetrain in. Go ahead and get it tightened down. Once you do that, let's go ahead and pull the bolt forward. Once you pull the bolt forward, pull it all the way forward as far as you can, and just kind of cycle it a few times. See if you have any lube popping up through here. And if you do, you just wipe it out of the groove, out of these holes, because it'll come out of these back portion of these holes right here. If you do, just kind of wipe it all off, get it out of the chamber, send it out on your fingers, and just wipe it on these O-rings right here, the back cap O-ring, the inner can or the outer can O-rings. Once you get that, and what you want to do is make sure you don't have any lube built up within the bolt tip right here. Let's go ahead and wipe that out, because what will end up happening is that O-ring, if you have a lot of the Dow 55 left over inside here, what will happen that O-ring will actually swell and soften, and then you're going to have issues with the bolt cycling back. It'll actually catch with inside the breech. So as the bolt is cycling back into the system, it'll actually catch at the lower portion of the feed neck, and you might have a leak during that shot. So once you shoot it, it won't cycle all the way back, and it'll start hissing a little bit. Then all of a sudden it'll seal up. So you want to take a look at this bolt tip O-ring. Always inspecting these bolt tip O-rings. This is going to be your main wear of any portion of your gun. This should be maintained quite often, because this is going to take the most brunt force out of the entire system, because this is where the balls drop on, any dirt that's in your pods, any dirt that falls down inside your marker. This is going to take the brunt force, because this actually rubs up against the detents as well. If you're starting to see detent wear on each side of the bolt, I would change this O-ring. So let's go ahead and slide that back on there, and notice our bolt is nice and slick. You can actually go ahead and cycle it forward just like that, and then okay. So let's go ahead and install this back into the marker. Once you install it back in there, Should be nice and snug. Shouldn't just fall itself in. If it's fallen in, it's real easy to do it. Go ahead and replace these O-rings, because that will affect a bit of your efficiencies, because it'll actually vent itself out the exhaust portion of this marker, and you may start to have a little bolt stick, and may start to have some first shot drop off, stuff like that. So let's go ahead and tighten it back up. Once you tighten these with your fingers, you shouldn't have to grab an Allen and snug them. It's not going to hurt if you do. You can go ahead and grab one and just barely put any force on it whatsoever, just to get it snug, and that's all you need. If you over tighten it, what you'll end up doing is crushing the can inside the marker, and then you're really in some trouble. And that's the bolt maintenance.